Okay, let's get into the last stat and then clothing. So the last stat I wanted to share with you guys is heart rate. Specifically, what I track when I go to elevation is my sleeping, resting heart rate. So what did my heart rate get to while I was sleeping? Now, when I'm at home in my own bed, in fact, I'll pull it up for last night just for reference. I'm typically in the 40s. Low 40s a lot of times. So my heart rate last night looks like it was 47. But a lot of times I'm sitting at, say, 44. That's probably my most common number, is 44 resting heart rate while I sleep. When I go to elevation, that's not what I'm getting. Day one, I was at 67. Now, for going into 10,000 feet terrain, that's actually quite common for me as the first night. A lot of times I'm even in low 70 ranges. So that was not concerning to me at all. I was like, okay, solid, right where I need to be based off of my historic information. Night number 2, I was at 66 on the resting. But I was in the 70s almost all night. I dipped for just a second right before I woke up into the 66.
And that night was about 1,000 feet higher.
Yeah, is a little bit higher. So there's kind of two things working against me there. But what I can learn from that, and I knew in the moment, was we camped at a spot where we didn't know there was water like 200 yards ahead because that was our latest camp we set up. Mm-hmm. And I was running low on water and I was getting just the slightest a bit dehydrated per se. Because what I typically like to do, especially at elevation, I'm very adamant that throughout the night, if I wake up to roll over, I grab a sip of water. I try to get rehydrated during the night. Well, that night, I didn't have to get up to go to the bathroom, and I could just tell that I was getting behind. So when I woke up that next morning, there were some concerns I was starting to develop, just like, oh man, I didn't drink as much as I wanted. But my resting heart rate still dipped right at the end to 66. And because I'm not really checking my phone statistics out there, I'm really just checking my resting end number. I didn't know that for most of the night I was in the 70s or even 80s. So then I get to night number 3, my resting was 75. Now, night number 3 was after the day where I started to not feel good. The tail end of that day, I started to lose my appetite. I started to feel very nauseous when we were climbing up North Pole Pass.
We had the 2 highest, biggest passes in that day. So we did Anderson Pass first thing in the morning and then North Pole Pass right before we camped. So it was just a massive day of effort. Our biggest miles, highest elevation.
Yeah, big day of effort, highest elevation, and right before dinner that night, I started to feel sick. We went to climb up Polar Bear Pass, North Pole Pass. I was feeling very sick, very sick. Got to the top, leveled off, felt okay, got to camp, did my best to, rehydrate and eat. Did okay just forcing things in, but my resting heart rate that night was 75. And I don't think that was because of the lightning. I think I calmed down after the lightning.
I noticed that mine was up during that lightning storm.
Yeah, during the lightning, yeah. I'm sure I was like at 100 beats per minute.
Yeah.
But that was, again, an indicator that, hey, maybe not everything is good. So that next day was kind of rough for me. Anytime we were going up passes, I was feeling that exertion, and I did not, throughout the whole day, have as much of an appetite. But we did sleep at a slightly lower elevation, probably 9,500 feet or something that night. And the next night, my resting heart rate dropped into the 50s again. So you can use statistics like this for your advantage by having something like the Garmin, which is available in the membership. It is beneficial, and it can really tell you, hey, if you've got things to worry about, it can help you build a database. Because what I would have expected was first night about 70 resting, next night about 60 resting, and then if I'm staying that high, I get into the 50s, but I stay in the 50s. I don't get into the 40s when I'm that high. My resting heart rate never is that low. So just some things to note. And they can help you realize, if you have a night where all of a sudden you're at 75 and you get up and check that, hey, maybe you need to take it easier that day. Or maybe you need to just stop and hydrate more frequently. Maybe you need to get a few more calories in, and just recognize that you might be coming up on something that's not going to be good on the other side of that. So it's good data to have.
I think when you listen to us talk about this kind of stuff, you may think like, oh, these guys are way overthinking like a fishing trip or a backpacking trip, you know. But we really do look at it as a sport. Like it's it's something that we take seriously, we enjoy, we want to improve our skills, our confidence, and our safety when we're up there. And so we just want to give ourselves every advantage that we can and make sure that we're doing it well. One thing that helps with your heart rate and high elevation, Tayson and I have both noticed at different times when we've been at high elevation together, not necessarily on this Highline trip, but on different trips, where you lay down and your heart's racing and you're like, oh, this is kind of weird. Like my heart rate is 85, 95, 100 beats per minute, and I'm just laying down doing nothing. Well, we've learned a lot due to a book called Breathe by an author named James Nestor. We've learned some great breathing techniques that help you to get that under control. And we've both done this. We've discussed it on trail where if we've had the issue of laying down to go to bed and our heart is still racing, we'll do some breathing exercises for
box breathing,
10 minutes, maybe 10 minutes. And then we'll get that heart rate to stabilize and go down. And then it will stay down over the night. We'll check it. And I think that really helps with recovery.
Yeah. The last time I can really remember doing that was on the first night of Highline 2 years ago, like really focusing on that. And that just kind of shows you the amount of effort that first day took out of us doing the 25 miles with the dry section. We were all getting dehydrated. We were all feeling the altitude. And I had to do it to try to get to sleep because my heart was racing, but also just trying to help myself get into a state of better recovery. But yeah, box breathing, you can look that up as a way to try to help with that. But yeah, nasal breathing, trying to breathe through your nose a little bit more can also help.
I think that's a big thing at high altitude is you're breathing while you're hiking. If you're nasal breathing and you're focused on breathing well while you're hiking, you can really save some energy and make your body a lot more efficient, as you're up there.
I've noticed this. This is not scientific, but I've noticed this. If I'm talking a lot while I'm hiking, that typically means that I'm breathing in and out through my mouth. And I personally notice that I seem to need more water or consume more water when I'm breathing through my mouth and talking, which makes sense, right? Your mouth is moist and your body has to keep it moist. Well, if I'm breathing through my mouth all the time, I'm breathing out some of that moisture more rapidly. And again, this is non-scientific, but I swear I have noticed this, that if I'm get through this big long discussion or something after an hour or two, I can get behind on hydration just from that because there's just versus nasal breathing. So nasal breathing, like your body's really designed to adapt to either dry, humid, like low humidity environments, high humidity environments. The moisture coming out of your nose doesn't need to be as moist as maybe when it comes out of your mouth because it's picking up stuff from your throat and your, or not necessarily throat, your mouth. So there's something to just nasal breathing and box breathing that would be worth looking into. Many people asked on comments when I did the 70 kilometer ultra marathon that I did. I had something on my nose. That's a piece from a brand called Intake that just opens up my nose. I have a pretty closed off nose, and so that just helps me breathe more through my nose, keep my heart rate a little bit lower, but also just keep me potentially from breathing out a little bit less fluid throughout the day. So, when I'm really breathing hard, especially like in some of those efforts, the tendency is to open up your mouth and start to breathe. If you can continue to breathe through your nose, that can help you with heart rate and it can help you with maybe hydration at a small level. So pretty interesting stuff. We geek out on it. But.
There's a little more scientific evidence in that Breathe book that we both enjoyed.
Yeah.
It's a little fringe kind of information, but I feel like it's helped a ton. I have 4 years of data in my Garmin stuff for a motorcycle race that I do. And after reading that book, there's a drastic improvement in my average heart rate over that 100-mile, 3-hour effort, which is I attribute a lot of that to some weight loss and to the breathing control.
So, yeah, really cool.